I am Araceli, a wealth advisor, real estate investor in the United States and Canada, and creator of Wealthy Women in Real Estate. Every week, I meet with Colette, a real estate broker and a real estate investor in Canada. We come together to talk about all things real estate investing and how to increase your wealth. Join us. Welcome, everyone. This is Araceli, transition wealth advisor and real estate investor in the US and Canada. And just remember, if you are interested in knowing more things about real estate investing and finances, please remember to subscribe so we can continue this channel. Today, with my chat with Colette, please tell us what we're talking about today. I think it's a fun one. Yes.
Oh no. Yeah, so we we're nervous about that. Anyway, let me introduce myself. My name, for you guys that don't know who I am, my name is Colette Raba. I am a real estate broker in the GTA, and I love helping tenants. No, scratch that. So, we're talking about tenants today. So I help landlords and I also help home buyers and sellers. But tenants are a tricky thing because they sometimes don't start out as tenants. They start out as guests of a tenant. And we wanted to let you know, when can you find out that that guest is no longer a guest, but they're staying and they become a tenant. So that's why I'm a little bit messed up today, because I have a lot to say about this, but I'm going to let you go ahead, Araceli, and tell us what the first thing is.
Yeah, so this is basically for landlords. As Colette said, sometimes you get a tenant and they decide to bring somebody, or maybe they're starting dating somebody. Don't know what the circumstances are. Maybe it's family that comes from other countries. We don't know. But basically, there's a fine line in when a guest of a tenant will become an actual tenant. So this is important, especially if you're a landlord, so you don't know what the line is. So the first one is that they stay overnight for a period of time. And that period of time depends. So Colette, you can talk more about this.
Yeah, okay. So there's also a little bit of a different kind of tendency that this is why I recommend this to all the landlords, that you make sure that you check in on your tenant or with your tenant regularly. So you can write that into your lease. You want very clear communication. You want to make sure your property is safe for them, but also that they respect you as the landlord and they respect your house or your property. So when it comes to saying, listen, like, we have an agreement here. This is an agreement between you and me, and you have a wife and you have a kid, or you have a wife and you have a mom, or whatever family is moving in with you, that goes on the lease. It's very, very clear on the rental agreement. You also have to write into your rental agreement that if somebody else moves in, they need to notify you beforehand. So when this becomes a problem is when, let's say you are a landlord and you have the rent set at whatever, let's say $2,000 a month, and that includes the utilities. Once more people start moving in, the utilities are naturally going to go up. You know, they're going to use more water, they're going to use more laundry, they're going to use more hydro. So all this makes a difference when it comes to having more people move in with you. Ontario law says you as a landlord are not allowed to regulate that. But between you and I, and between you and a tenant, you have to have these conversations. You can write it into the lease to say, if more people move in, this is what's going to happen. And you have that conversation with your tenant. What happens if you're not close to your property and you don't see anybody moving in or out? That's when it gets difficult, where you have to trust that tenant to tell you.
Well, that's why it's important, if you have a property that is remote, that you have a property manager that is in the area that can monitor what is happening. But so let's finish the first point, which is when the tenant, when the guest of a tenant stays overnight for a period of time. So you were
Right.
going to tell us how many days is that?
Yes. So that's really, it depends on you. Even before how I do it, I vet my tenants. I know where they are. I know what kind of lifestyle they have. And I ask those questions. Let's say they're new to Canada. So this is a big thing for me when somebody is new to Canada or newer. So they haven't been renting, they don't have a big rental history. So you say, how long have you been here? Oh, I've only been here for a year. My family is in whatever country. And I say, okay, what other family do you have here? And we have a conversation about it. I'm not doing anything wrong. I am having a conversation with the tenant. The tenant tells me out of their own free will, oh, I plan on bringing my whole family here from wherever and in the next 2 years. And I have that conversation with them beforehand. So at that point, I could reject them. Just on that, I don't have to accept them as a tenant if my spidey senses tell me, oh, they're going to move 20 people in a few months from now, and I have chaos in this house, and this house is not meant to have 5 people or whatever, how many people living here. This is a 1-bedroom apartment, let's say.
Yeah.
So
I
these are all the
usually,
questions.
I want to interrupt you because we wanted to say how many days, and I think it is one
Right.
month, which
I
is
think it's
28
less than
to,
1 month.
okay.
So I
You
write
would put
in
it
my,
less than a month. Okay.
yeah, so
So
I write it
what is
in
that
my
number?
agreement. I
What is
write it
that
in
number?
my lease. I usually say 20 because the shortest month is February.
Yeah.
So I say after either 2 weeks, that person stays, because really, who takes a holiday for more than 2 weeks?
Yeah.
So you can either say after 14 days, that person becomes a tenant, or at 28 days, so under 1 month.
Okay.
So they have to make that decision before it becomes a 1 month situation. So make sure you write that into your lease. Be very, very specific about it. You can even, so on the agreement, I'm sorry, I'm going through a lot of detail, but when you have the agreement, the Ontario lease agreement, have them initial that they have actually read that clause, because it will help you later to prove that they were not allowed to bring more people in.
Yeah.
Even though I have to say, Ontario law says you cannot regulate that, how many people are living in that property. So be very, very careful about it. That's all.
Okay. So
Number
that's
2.
good. So number 2 is when they move their belongings. So if
Right.
you see that they're bringing things on there, especially if they have another bed, if you see that you have one tenant in and then they bring another bed in,
Right.
then
And
that's when you know.
I have to say the other thing too is pets. So when they bring a pet in and then you find out that they have a pet and you knock on the door and say, hey, whose dog is this? They say, oh, it's my friend's dog.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can ask that question, oh, how long is the dog staying? And don't, don't mix words. Like, you can't, once you have a lease with that person, you can't say no to a pet.
Mm-hmm.
But if they lie about it, if they are not clear on it, if the dog is very disruptive to the neighborhood, then you can actually evict the person. So, but you have to prove it. So again, very gray area. You have to be very, very specific. And from what I said at the beginning, communication with your tenant is key.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
that's number 2,
So
dog.
that number 3
clothes.
is when the guest is actually using the unit as a mailing address. So if you see that you said, well, I don't recognize this number, but it's going to that house, then you can ask your tenant, who is this person? Do you know them? Oh,
Right.
it's my friend, right?
Right. And that's so that again, that sometimes I heard a story in the States where somebody was using their friend's address just to get their kid into that good school,
Mm-hmm.
which, you know what, to me, that doesn't bother me. But again, it's about communication, having the tenant being clear with you as the landlord. I don't want to tattle on anybody. If you're okay, that person is actually not living there, but just using the address, then the tenant should have enough courage and enough communication with the landlord to tell them in advance. So
Mm-hmm.
just to say, hey, listen, heads up, they're not living here, but this is what's going on.
Exactly.
Uh, yeah, and that's the other thing too. Like, you don't want, the other reason why you have to stay on top of this is because if your tenant actually moves out and they sublet to that other person, you have to know all this stuff. It should be in the lease to say, listen, if you need to leave for whatever reason, if you can't afford the rent anymore, but I need to approve that tenant. You
Yeah.
can't just have them move in and take over.
Yeah.
So another reason why it's very important for you to have that communication with the tenant.
Yeah, and so the reason that I put this here, that the unit, they use the unit as a mailing address, you know that the person is going in and out, so you've seen them regularly, and then
Right,
all of a sudden you see, a letter coming in, so then you know that they're using that as their primary residence. So that's one. And
right.
also the other thing that you know that you can't really prove, but if you know that the guest is paying money to the tenant, like
Yeah, so that's the
subletting,
number
right?
four sign.
Yeah,
Right. So if the tenant, and people, you have to pay attention to the way people talk, because sometimes a tenant will actually blurt it out to say,
yeah,
"Oh, I didn't get the half of the rent or the share of the
yes,
rent from this other person." It's like, "Oh, hold on a second. That was never in agreement. You're the
yeah,
person that's on the lease
yeah.
100%." But that's a red flag. So all these little things, you have to stay on top of it as a landlord and have those hard conversations with your tenants, right?
Exactly. And the
Yeah,
thing is, if you are not the property manager, that means if you own the property, but you're doing the property manager, you will do, like Colette said, talk to the tenant, take a look at it, monitor the area, and so on, so you can see who's coming in and out.
yeah,
But if you do have the property manager, they will take care of that. They should take a look at who is in the property, and if they
yeah,
see people coming in and out that shouldn't be there, then now that's when they have to come and ask, and that's what you expect a property manager would do for you, because you want to make sure that your expenses are going to go up, because obviously there's more people going in, and
oh, sure.
they are responsible to look after that.
Yeah, and that's all you're really asking the tenant is to be in communication with you. If they're not doing anything wrong, they should have no problem communicating with you and saying, "Oh, my friend's here from wherever, and they're
Yeah,
just coming to visit me for a couple weeks," or "My family is here, but they're going to find a place to live. They just needed a place to land for a few weeks before they
yeah,
find their own property." So as long as the communication is clear
yeah,
and your tenant understands that you're not a bully landlord, you just want to make sure your property is safe and that everything is taken care of. Sometimes tenants are so wonderful, they'll even say, hey, listen, my friend is staying for a couple weeks. I know they're going to use a little bit more water.
yeah,
Can I give you
yeah,
whatever, a little bit more
something, yeah,
money, $100 or something, to cover those costs?
yeah,
So this is why being a good tenant and being a good landlord, so important on both sides.
yeah. But all it comes down to communication, so you have to be honest about what is happening. Sometimes that's what it is, things change over time,
Sure.
and that is okay. And if there is enough room for another person, if you start let's say renting to a single person, and then they meet somebody and then they come in, you can work something out, like if there's enough room for it. If
Right.
you said no, the space is too small for 3 4 people, then that's a different story, but you
Right.
don't want to end up there if you don't monitor it. So
Right.
it's
Right.
the
And
best way
even
to.
I've had lots of tenants say, I've gotten this. This is during a separation, and my kids will be here part time. They may move in with me at a certain point, and they're 5 and 7.
Yeah,
So stuff like that with kids, at least it's totally fine. It's nothing is wrong with that. You just want to know if the utilities are being used and they're more, or
hmm,
the wear and tear on the property too. That's all you have to say to a tenant. We just want to know what the wear and tear is going to be like.
yep, that's
Yeah.
right. So I
Yeah.
hope this helped. So just remember, if you see that there is a guest from one of your rental units, then you know that if they spent time overnight for 2 weeks, 14 days, or less than a month, which is 28 days, then you know that they are becoming a tenant. When they move their belongings, so you see physically moving a bed, a pet, something like that, that you know is there and they're going in and out. When they use the unit as their mailing address. And the last one is when the guest is actually paying money to the tenant. And those are the four things that you need to watch for. And so then you have to work out a new agreement with the tenant at that point.
Exactly. Yeah. So again, really easy.
Yeah.
Don't be scared.
Yeah, that's right. So,
Yeah,
and remember, everything is communication. So, thank you,
absolutely.
Colette, for today's episode. And if you guys have a question, or maybe you run into the situation, let us know and find out. We would like to know how did you resolve it if you did, or what other measures did you take?
Oh yeah, yeah. And we have lots of horror stories. We don't want to share them because we don't want you to be scared of being a landlord and being an income
Yeah,
property owner. Most of the time, it's wonderful
yeah,
if you know how to vet your tenants well, if you know that communication is very clear between both of you, things work out very, very nicely. So, and lots of people do it. So
yeah.
don't be scared, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Thank you for being here on the show. Please remember to subscribe and hit the notification bell to get notified when there are more shows available. And if you would like to have more information on how to start investing in real estate, please visit my website at www.aracelihernandez.com. Thank you.